Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
I had forgotten that as a young person, quite young, I remember, that I would be able to have an inner dialogue with myself about all sorts of things. I think many of us do this. What do I want to have for dinner tonight? What did I think of that movie? How am I feeling about the way I was just treated in that interaction? And when we ask ourselves those questions, something answers. There's clearly more than one element of our being, of who we are and what we're doing. And I gave in a little bit when I was younger to, only crazy people talk to themselves. And I was like, uh-oh. And then, well, only crazy people answer themselves. And I was like, man, I'm in trouble. Like, I got a whole committee in there, like having a conversation. Like, this is not going to be good. And so I wasn't sure about it. But then later, as I started to study, I mean, even Freud and Jungian, the idea of the id, the ego, the superego, that there are definitely these different parts of who we are and what we're experiencing and what's happening.
Introducing a powerful new update from the Foojan app. Now with flexible subscription plans to fit your journey monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Our new AI-driven onboarding customizes your path to feeling better, faster, and enjoy a refreshed experience with stunning 3D interactive videos. Update now. Empower your inner voice with Foojan. Download today.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm Dr. Foojan Zain, a psychotherapist and author and the founder of International Awareness Integration Institute. Today, I will be talking to David Alan Brown. He has been teaching personal empowerment, leadership, organizational development, self-discovery, and spirituality to audiences across the country for more than 30 years. He's the author of many books, including Answer the Call, What to Do When Spirit Arrives to Transform Your Life, and The Self-Help Paradox. He frequently leads classes and services at progressive congregations, including more than a decade of service at New Thought Unity Center of Cincinnati and churches from Florida to Minnesota, Arizona to New York. He's in New York now. He also facilitates and consults for corporations and nonprofit organizations, leading programs on leadership, culture, authenticity, presentation skills, and staff development. His most recent publication is actually an online course. It's called Convergence. In Convergence, he teaches people how to recognize and regulate their inner voices to live intentionally each day and manifest their goals. He is here today to talk with us about how this became his life's work, how he integrated into his daily life, and what makes it special for him. He talks about 3 kind of voices that are inside of us, and we'll go kind of detailed into those. And I think, I'm hoping and I'm positive that you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I do. Now, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, Foojan Zain, FoojanZain.com, or any of my social media platforms. Share your thoughts with me. I love to hear from you. Now, without further ado, here's David Alan Brown.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zain, and Dr. Manoukian, 3 experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Well, welcome to the show, everyone. David Alan Brown.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Chris, thank you for being here all the way from New York. So everyone who's listening or watching us, we're coast to coast, right?
That's right.
So, you have developed a program named Convergence, and there's a interesting conversation around an inner world that you connect to, and there's elements of connection that shows up, and I got very interested to really get to know. First of all, what is convergence and what is the elements of connection? But maybe before you share that with us, your path toward this concept of, the growth and bringing all of this together, because it's like most of us, right? Like I created awareness integration theory, and it was part of my healing toward myself, and then the presence of the healing toward my clients, and learning everything that I've ever learned and bringing them together to create that flourishes that. And I really am interested in your journey, as it developed to the model of convergence.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I think we share that sense of passion and completion. I'm to a point where I really do feel like this is kind of my life's work. Everything that's happened before has brought me here. And so I'm very, very proud of the work and where it is. And the journey itself is long, and I've written most of it down, but no publisher has come running just yet. But, what I discovered in the last 5 or 6 years, as my her healing journey took a major curve, which is to say that I went back being quite good, and I really invested in myself again after a long period of sort of dismissal and I don't know if what's the opposite of self-discovery? I guess self-ignorance almost was that I had forgotten that as a young person, quite young, I remember that I would be able to have an inner dialogue with myself about all sorts of things. I think many of us do this. What do I want to have for dinner tonight? What did I think of that movie? How am I feeling about the way I was just treated in that interaction? And when we ask ourselves those questions, something answers. There's clearly more than one element of our being, of who we are and what we're doing. And I gave in a little bit when I was younger to, only crazy people talk to themselves. And I was like, uh-oh. And then, well, only crazy people answer themselves. And I was like, man, I'm in trouble. Like, I got a whole committee in there, like having a conversation. Like, this is not going to be good. And so I wasn't sure about it. But then later, as I started to study, I mean, even Freud and Jungian, the idea of the id, the ego, the superego, that there are definitely these different parts of who we are and what we're experiencing and what's happening. So I grew up and I did a lot of adult things, and I was a stay-at-home dad, and I was married, and I am a writer, and I really had gone out and done a lot of teaching. But over the course of really my adulthood, for a long time, I really just found myself quite trapped and really not paying much attention, especially to those voices or understanding. And so after a period of what for me was pretty intense depression, and my depression wasn't sadness, my depression was a numbness, just really not feeling anything. I began to make a turn and found good help, and really began to be authentic and open, and all of a sudden recognized that these inner parts of me had been desperate to play a part in the act of living, so to speak. And as I put together my understanding as a spiritual teacher, as my life as a person and as a parent, and as I walked through this place, and then beginning to rediscover emotion and how powerful it is and what a gift it is to us, I really came upon those three primary areas of our life that became the three. Well, for me, they're voices. For other people, it's a journal or whatever. But in my course, I tend to talk about them as voices because for me, I mean, I'm a very verbal person. And so the other thing that happened as I began to rediscover, again, that inspiration side, the active side, and the emotional side, was I could reflect back on times in my life where either of any of those voices had been completely ignored and therefore were not engaged, or other times when I'd been completely stuck in one or the other. And neither is a good situation. The goal of convergence is to have a conversation within the parts of you in which the three elements come together, they converge, they agree. and they agree on a response, or they agree on an action, or they agree on how to self-soothe, or they agree on what the mission to move forward is. They agree on the way we're stepping into our lives. They agree on how we're going to be loving today to all people and all creatures, including ourselves. They agree, and that convergent energy is very, very powerful energy. It brings all of our elements together and makes us the most actualized we can be in our lives. And getting to that conversation is not always easy, especially as in my case, some of those voices were neglected. But being able to enter into it and know that the resources for excellence and for creation are always right there within us when we manage that conversation well. And in fact, the program goes to a final step, which is about manifestation. Now that I understand these different elements and can enter into this conversation and generate this powerful energy, how might I turn that into the life that I've really always wanted to have? And so we go there as well.
It's interesting when you talk about voices. I remember the first time I really was, obviously they're always there. But the first time I started really looking at them is when I went to therapy, and my therapist said to me, I was about 20 in my 20s, and said, it's interesting. You have this voice that disciplines you consistently, and you talk to yourself in a way that is as if, a parent is standing there and telling you what to do and what not to do. And that was the first time I recognized, yeah, there is a part of me that, kind of like disciplines me the same way that, it's an inner discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously becoming a therapist, and we listen to all of the voices that are up there, recognizing again some of the the disciplinarian ones versus whether we had a nurturing disciplinarian or aggressive or abusive disciplinarian. I think we have those, but then there's also these vulnerable parts of us who also have needs, or demanding parts of us who have needs. And there's so many different areas of us that do talk, and it's the awareness of how to listen to them, and then how to distinguish between them is very, very important. So you have kind of classified it into 3 categories of the voices you share. Can you share what those 3 are?
Okay. So the first and sometimes most obvious for people who are entering into the course or into conversation with me is what I call the actualized being. It's that we live in this world, and that we have responsibilities, and there's things that we need to do. And one of my favorite things, I love the phrase, all you need is love.
Yeah.
And eventually I figured out, well, all you need is love and a cheeseburger. Like, I can't, I still have to sleep. I still have to eat. I still have income. I still live in a culture and in a society. And I find that I can be very stuck there because there's so much to do. There's so much input. It seems as if just surviving can be enough sometimes. And I also find that I can be completely neglectful there because I am not making choices that are the most self-caring, or I can put my focus on a place that is, just about the doing and not about the experiencing and being a part of that. For a while I thought this was the intellectual side, and there is an element of that to it. But what I actually found is it's the doing side. Because when voices converge, this is the side that comes through and then takes action and is inspired to do, which is lovely for us to realize that in real life there is impact in everything that we do, and so we want to do that in an inspired way. Mm-hmm. The second voice is no, go ahead. Yeah.
So it's more like a voice that is also intentional. So it actually moves the muscles to get up and go.
Absolutely. And its needs are action. Its need is to have purpose. Its need is to make a difference in the world. And so oftentimes that voice for me will respond to an emotional side or an input with, what should I do now? That might be a question that would come up. Sometimes if I'm really stuck there, the question might be harsher, like it just doesn't seem like anything matters. or it doesn't seem like there's anything I can do. And so empowering this voice is helping it provide an inspiration for what is truly meaningful action, and also providing it with a response mechanism, and that's the second voice, and that's our emotions and feelings. So anytime we take an action or something occurs that's outside of our control, we have an internal response. And some of these are physiological, some of these are just plain feelings and emotions, and they just rear up. The interesting part about engaging with this voice is how do we respond when that happens? And being stuck there often feels like great overwhelm, or and sometimes it's very natural. I mean, grief is being stuck in our emotional state, and sometimes it's there for a very real cause and a very real reason. It's not that all of this is in balance perfectly every time. It's that are we engaging with it when it does happen? Because what I came to discover was I completely neglected my feelings. I was raised that anger was bad. I was led to believe that happiness should be the natural common state. I didn't know what to do with envy. I didn't know, fear in a spiritual sense was verboten for me in some of my teaching. Except that isn't realistic. That's not being a human being. And so when I came to discover, oh, well, the gift of anger is motivation. The gift of fear is safety and caution. The gift of joy is inspiration and motivation. All of these things, all of these emotions are there for a reason. And really the great need of the emotional side is to be recognized and to be engaged with. And the great need of the emotional side is to not be judged, but to be incorporated into the conversation. I feel this way, and I feel this way, so I feel this way, and perhaps, and then the action side might come in. What action could we take? What do you need to know and hear? Or action side does something, takes a step forward in faith and says, I'm going to try this, I'm going to go to this place. And after you do it, what do you think? Well, how did that feel? Exactly the right question to ask, because your emotional side is going to provide you with that response. I felt scary but excited. I felt elated and invested. I felt very uncomfortable. This doesn't seem right for me. Okay, great. Let's listen to all those voices so that we can incorporate them into the actions that we do and not just be blindly or blithely walking through our lives.
Well, it's
So
very
those are
interesting because you're starting with the action, and the action is something that we can actually observe much easier than our inner thoughts or our inner emotion, because it's out there, and like you said, it's a movement that happens. So the you start with action. Sometimes we start with, like, the thought, the emotions that lead to action. You're also looking at the action that is there and the thought process that puts us into action, and then looking at the emotions that are there, which again, incorporating the emotion as a motivation piece into the action, or to incorporate the emotion, looking at what your needs and desires are. So emotions are also the voice of that for you, because it'll tell you, I'm sad or resentful and all of that because the need is not getting met, or I'm excited and content and happy because my needs are being met. So,
right.
and then you're looking at, okay, if they're met, awesome. If they're not met, then what is the action I need to do in order to create that need to be met?
Yes, absolutely. And I start even in this conversation from action, because I think my experience in working and coaching with people is that that's so often just where they are. You start, what did you do today? What action did you take today? How did you make it through today? What is it that you want to have do? And we are, maybe to an unfortunate degree, led to believe that the what we receive in return is the point. Well, I did this so that I could get money. Oh, I did this so that I could, have this impact on this person. It's very externalized. And so part of beginning there is to recognize, okay, yeah, that's what I do. What else is there? What's the internal drive and reward and understanding? I think we all know people very successful in their careers and are wildly unhappy. And so where do we incorporate those two things together? I think it begins to happen there quite naturally. And then when we're ready, we can invite the third voice in, although many of us would love for it to be the place that we start. It isn't always, and that's a place of inspiration, higher power. I really am straightforward with people who enter into my course is that having a belief in a power and an energy greater than ourselves is sort of required here. And I'm not starting a church. You'll define that for yourself, whatever greater power that you understand. I kind of draw that phrase from 12-step programs, higher power. You can define that. And yet, if you're agnostic or atheistic, my course isn't for you, because what happens is the magic of bringing the voices together with something that is so powerful, so omniscient, so interconnected with everything that we do, and really fundamentally such the basis of the insightful and practical love that we really all want to converge upon or bring into our experience, both in our actions and to help nurture and understand our feelings.
How do you how do you let's say recognize that there is a voice of a higher power or a higher self that is there? I remember talking to someone, and they told me that, it was actually one of our guests in the podcast, and she said, she was talking about her own divorce, and she was remorseful about her divorce. And she said, that as I kept talking to my God and saying, and why wasn't I listening, and why wasn't I talking? And then at one point, and I said, what is it that you recognize as that? Who do you talk to? Because this is all, again, like you said, it's an inner dialogue. And how do I know the distinctions between these inner dialogue, that which one is my action, what is a figment? I mean, let's say all of it is a figment of my imagination, but okay, it's a figment of my imagination. And then there's this other piece, which I call higher power, or, for each spiritual doctrine, people have their own, essence of it. But my question to you is, how do I know that that's, the voice of my higher self, my higher power, or all the other piece that is there? Because it's funny, because and this is not a question from you, this is a question that I've always asked. And I play this thing in my head. If there is a God, you better show yourself. And how do I know it's you? So this thing has been there for, a lifetime. And this communication is still continues. It's like, there's an essence, and I'm like, yeah, that's just a figment of my imagination. What if it's just I'm imagining? And I'm like, well, it's a good imagination. I have no problem with this imagination, because obviously it works for me. I have no problem with it being my imagination or not, but it's still this distinction. Since you're bringing it up, I'm like, hey, why don't, from your perspective,
Sure.
What is the answer to that? How do you define that?
Yeah, well, and I want to continue that thought for a second, and then I'll answer your question, which is, yes, of course, it's all our imagination. I mean, that's the creative power of the universe is in our human experience, and it's not happening outside of us. I mean, I would invite people to look around the room that they're in right now, or whatever condition they're in, and aside from things that are naturally growing, like plants or trees or whatever, realize that everything else that you're seeing is a result of human imagination and exploration. The fact that we're coast to coast right now, this computer, this mug, how did pottery come to be? The most basic to the most advanced things have all come from human imagination. And so, yes, of course, it's our imagination. That's the very power that we're talking about. We're not dismissing that as, oh, it's just my imagination. Yes, convergence is putting these elements into the very amazing human function of imagination and creation. So I just want to reiterate that, yes, of course it is, and yay, because what many of us don't do is engage in that. We say, oh, it's just happening. I don't know how this pencil got here. I don't know how this got here. Life is just this thing. It just keeps coming at me. It's just bombarding me. I don't know what to do. It's just, no. The engagement. And to your question, because it's great, because faith is one of our biggest challenges, because we do have these other voices in us that don't always connect. that can be separate or believe that they're separate from this third. That's why the convergence is so important, because it's an intentional integration of faith and higher power into the conversation and into our lives. How do I know that that's the voice? Whenever I ask the question, that's the voice that brings love there. That's the voice that brings compassion there. That's the voice that brings forgiveness and understanding there, consistently, effortlessly, timelessly, without fail, every time. Your emotions are validated and embraced. You as a human being are recognized as a loving, insightful, worthy person. Your actions are embraced or inspired or forgiven. You're able to look through a lens of gratitude and appreciation, and to see through discernment these, I call them signposts that come along the way. Manifestation is no longer just dream it and it will appear. Oh, if I concentrate hard enough, then there'll be a Porsche in the driveway. Manifestation is understanding that by responding to a call to do an inspired action or behave in an inspired way, that we will become able to discern signposts of, oh, and that was the right thing. Sometimes they're very distinct feelings. Sometimes they're real life acquisitions in what we're doing. Other times they're the loving embrace of a higher power that says, dear one, you have done the best you can. You are enough and you are worthy today. And just know that without ceasing. And the remarkable thing about hearing that voice one time is it becomes so comforting. It becomes the blanket in which you wrap yourself. And you want to begin to integrate it into the conversation. And that's part of what we provide is, okay, spiritual practice is called that for a reason. We practice how we develop our faith, how we work with discernment, how we recognize signs, how we enter into prayer and conversation. It becomes an integrated practice, and it takes time. And yet, I never fail to feel or experience or invite in or be inspired by that well of unconditional love.
So the voice is an unconditional love and regards, and that's what the message of that voice inside is. So when you kind of let go of what shows up to me is, like a diamond in the rough where it has a lot of mud around it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you hear the stuff show up and you acknowledge it and you acknowledge this is it, and then you clean it up, and then the shine that shows up through it's that kind of unconditional love and regards for all, not only for me but for all being, for all that is in life. And that's where we want to hear it and we want to land.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's almost like the essence that allows the healing to happen, and then you clean it up and then you land there. And that's the part that you're sharing as the sound, the voice of the higher space than you might be in the middle of the mud wrestling.
Yes, because I love your metaphor, because the muck is real. The what is around there has happened. And so let's take it another step further. We're focusing on, and eventually you get to the diamond. Yes, and you've also shed stuff. You've polished. You've done some work. You've had to cut through some craters. You've had to get through some junk there. And I think that's one of the most important elements of understanding what actualization is. There is no magic cure. There is no wand waved. It does take. Sometimes that dirt is really stuck on there, and sometimes it's kind of stinky, and sometimes we don't even want to even be on that side of the diamond. Like, ugh, I'm not even going to address that today. Sometimes even the inner work, those voices are spicy and frustrated and angry or neglected. Okay.
And sometimes you give up.
What's that?
Sometimes you give up because you're trying to scrap some of the mud, and it's like, oh my, that's just too much. There's no way that I'm not even going to get there. And some people have never experienced the light inside, so it's like, so what? Even if I do, there's just going to be more mud. There's no hope that there's something else which is going to be shining inside, and a lot of people give up on that.
That's right.
That there's even a work to be done, because it's, to them, sometimes it is all just a clump of mud, and not recognizing that the diamond is inside.
That's right. And I think that that's what we come to understand as, severe difficulties and sometimes true mental health issues is that, and I think that that's what, when I got to a point where, as I say, there was a numbness, there was a definitely a loss, what I called getting smaller and smaller, which is probably, by our metaphor, that diamond getting smaller and smaller. That sense of, even if I find it, will it even be worth it? That's a very frustrating thought. But the one that really turned me was moving from a place of I don't feel well, and asking myself, or being asked by others, well, what would make it better? And then not knowing. And that moves from sadness to despair. Oh, now I've lost hope. Now I'm not sure what will be there. You and I both know that the response here is to then seek help, to then reach out to those, because my voices were mute. I could not call on what was within me in order to make a big enough difference, because they were angry or just plain shut down. And so I needed someone who could help guide me towards not just hope that maybe the diamond would be there, but really a gratitude for that life is about cleaning the stuff off.
Yeah.
That life is about sorting through the emotions. That life is about discovering the relationships, good and bad.
Yeah.
And so I came to find value in what was surrounding the diamond, understanding that the light then was everywhere, that I wasn't seeking this one inner jewel, maybe someday I would get it, that I was in fact engaging with all of the parts of my being and discovering that all of them had value, and that the light, which I thought was coming from within, it's actually shining from without. How am I even seeing the stuff?
Yeah, and
seeing it because the light is there.
Yeah, it happens also with the experiential concept of being present. But for me, it was the experiential concept of being present with someone who was shining.
Yes.
Who was offering me and people around them with the highest level of unconditional love and regards.
Absolutely.
And to not to see it only, but to also experience it being beside them. It was more like a completely a new experience. And it's like, it's not just a theory, it actually exists. And then I think that when you experience the existence of it, then it's like, okay, I'm ready to get away, I'll shake off these months. And yes, I know it has helped, but and I think part of like what people experience in the right psychotherapy or coaching or, spiritual places that they go, it's like this experiential concept, not only like, oh yeah, there's somewhere light there. Yeah, sure. I've never experienced it. So, oh, well, but to experience it in the being of the presence of someone who has that shine. And then you get a glimpse of the experience. You get a glimpse of that feeling that arises, which then gives you the motivation, which then gives you the other side of you, the other voice motivation of, hey, maybe I can do this work because now I have the hope or the faith or just even the evidence, not just, something I don't know, but I have the evidence because I've seen it, I feel it, and it's here. And there's a part of me that can access that and not just watch it on someone else, but access that inside.
Absolutely. And I want to reflect that how beautifully, whether you were intending to or not, you illustrated the three aspects that are there. You use the words. There's an action, there's an experience, there's a something that happens that makes you feel a certain way, which leads you to an understanding. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's very natural for us to go to that place. I think the only thing that I would remind folks as well is that although, and I do believe this to be true, although our responsibility as human beings is to provide that the opportunity to be a beacon and to to be the person that you were just talking about, someone who is glowing and who's bringing that unconditional love. I also want to remind people that it's not always a person. It's sometimes it is that moment of grace. Sometimes it happens in nature. Sometimes it happens because a coincidence has occurred, or and it may be people, but it might not be people you know. Train your algorithm if you're someone who scrolls to see those things that bring you joy, that you see kindness happening. They've done studies about that. You're probably familiar that in brain chemistry, seeing an act of kindness creates the same response in our brains as doing an act of kindness. It's
Yes.
fascinating and amazing. And so we have the ability to cultivate these things without, and I guess all I was cautioning about is without believing that it's a certain relationship that does it for us. It
I
is, in fact, the light that comes from people all over.
Yeah, I've had many clients who they were very much abused by human beings. So they found that with their pets first. They found that
Sure.
beauty and love through, the relationship with their dog, with their cat. And that begun the concept, it's like the dog, every time they sees you, so much unconditional love and regards to you, even if, at one point you're disciplining or, putting a leash on the dog, there's still so much loving you. And these were the first elements of experiencing kind of like a personal love that they could relate to and experience. And then, yes, going with the nature and how it could take care of you. And then slowly but surely, allowing other people who would shine to possibly get role model and then allow to your life. So that's for sure. It really does. It doesn't have to be in particular with one or two particular ways of relationship.
Yeah, beautiful.
So kind of like wrapping up, we have your model of convergence brings you to the awareness of the three kinds of voices, internal dialogues, internal parts of you. One is action oriented, one is emotion oriented, and one is the unconditional regards and love oriented that holds and contains all of this and brings the message from that context into the emotion and the action as you move forward, and how to come to understand and aware and then lead and guide yourself into that part that then these three voices are dialoguing with each other and kind of getting aligned in what it is. And then as we're coming to the close, let's hit the manifestation part.
Okay. Hit the manifestation part. So in my journey, there have been many fad manifestations, I guess I should sort of say. We had books and for a while, some talk show hosts got pretty intent on what I was saying before, that sort of straight line of I pick an image in my mind, and if I stick with it and focus on it, and if I don't know, I guess if I'm good or do it right or something, then eventually that will come to pass. And I found that to be extremely frustrating, and so did most people, which is why it didn't work. And then people said, well, see, new thought is bunk anyway, and then nobody believed anything anyway. So what I came to understand was that there's a cycle to true manifestation that these integrated voices help with. And sometimes the voices are a little stronger depending where you are in the cycle. So certainly there's inspiration, and there's the willingness to hear and believe and have faith in an understanding of not only worthy, but a sense of, and this is your purpose. This is what you're meant to do. This is why the universe needs you here, which fundamentally always starts with because we need you to step out and be a beacon of love. But also in the plane that we live on is, and so here's some ways to do that and also sustain yourself. After we're inspired, we do need to take some steps, some action in faith and say, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try, teaching. I'm going to try music. I'm going to try something in the medical field, finding something to do, to try and experience. And when we do that, we enter into a discernment stage, which both by the results in the action, but also listening to the feelings. How did I feel about the way that occurred? And when we feel and are confident that we're feeling motivation, joy, gratitude, appreciation, love. Oh, well, then we step forward with a great deal more trust. Now we're actually saying, oh, there seems to be signs. There's been discernment that this is actually happening. Inspiration comes in there, says, yes, thank you for recognizing the signs. Here's another. Here's another. Sometimes they're very tangible and sometimes they're more emotional. Well, so then, and this is the one that people also often get frustrated with, well, then comes you got to do the work. And you got to dive in and you got to make an action plan and you got to figure out what steps are required both on the macro level in order to get where I want to go and on the micro level. What am I going to choose to do today and in this moment? And I mean, we provide you with some real fundamental tactics for doing that because sometimes people have amazing dreams. They just don't know how to break it down into actually doing the work. And so whenever any milestone along that path, including filling out the form of what work you're going to do, then we celebrate that. And we say, yay, look at us. So, and we send that out to the universe and we say, what will happen because I've answered the call, so to speak, because I've made the choice. And the universe inspiration will come back and say, well, this is what's going to happen. And so here's the next thing that could occur. And you enter into the circle all over again, which of course isn't a circle, it's a spiral, because we just keep going up and up and up. But this notion that, well, there's a beginning and an end is no longer valid, because when we're in the flow of the process, we're just keep learning and learning and loving and loving.
So one part of the misunderstanding that I think happened with a lot of the secret movement or a lot of those manifestation was, for some reason, I think because, human being love things effortlessly, they figured, oh, I can just sit down and I can wish, and then I open my eyes and, the genie will bring this right happen as effortlessly as the shows, in 1970s or whatever they showed us, then obviously there's nothing. And part of what you're sharing and what the actual conversation is that, yes, you have the vision, you want to manifest and all of that, but there's definitely an part to it. It's not as effortless as you think. And, if yes, your vibration gets somewhere that you're that effortless, but most 8 billion people are not that way, and they actually do need to put some effort into it and action and skills that needs to be there. However, it's if at least what you want and what you want to manifest, at least your eyes are open to all the possibilities that are out there that you would have missed those opportunities and possibilities because you weren't looking for them, because if I'm looking for, a gourmet, Italian restaurant on the street, I'm going to bypass all the, fast foods because that's what I'm looking for. And then obviously if there is one, it'll show up for me. But if I'm really just wanting McDonald's and move forward, I'm going to miss the Italian restaurant because I'm not looking for it. I'm looking for something else. So it's that openness of knowing what it is you want, and then therefore your eyes are open to all the opportunities. And then yes, it takes that action part of you to move forward. We got about 1 minute to kind of wrap up. Anything we haven't said that you really, really want people to know?
I think we've covered so much, and part of, I guess, what I would say as a sum is do it, and not it like the everything. Do something and allow yourself to trust how you feel about it, and to have the wherewithal to to evaluate what's just gone on in order to make an intentional decision to do the next thing. And that's really all that it is. It's, yes, creating a magnificent life in the end, as we go, whatever. But this is a very practical understanding that by bringing intention and discernment and trust to our daily lives, we find ourselves fulfilled and fulfilling our mission on earth, which is really to be love in action and to be a delighted and delightful person.
David Allen Brown, everyone, how can people find you?
Well, that's the name, David Allen Brown, and that's my website, davidallenbrown.com. The only trick, sometimes people in the middle name, Allen, A-L-A-N, but I'm sure that'll be in your show notes or whatever. Click through there and you can find my programs. You can find a link to me directly, a way to reach out. I love to talk to folks about what's happening and how this is working for them. We're building a community of people who are supporting each other, who are doing this process. So I hope people will check it out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
So great to be with you. Thank you.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And if you liked what you heard and something in this conversation inspired you, please share with others and share the love. That's all I can say. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zain is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.